All right, folks, it is Tuesday, March 26th. So yesterday, I want to go over again. I had to reread my report last night because there's been so much out there now about the inverted yield curve and all these hysterical predictions of recession. So I had to go back and I had to reread it. And I was reading it really with a very objective, critical eye. I wanted to pick up, and remember, I focus on all the MMT related data, fiscal flows, bank credit. These are the things that create the conditions which ultimately are reflected in the economy. These are not data that reflect what has happened in the economy. As most economists, that's the data they look at, right? We come out industrial production, employment, capacity utilization, housing starts, this kind of stuff. That's all rearward looking data. What I'm looking at through the lens of MMT, of course, through the understanding of MMT, are the things which create the conditions in the economy. So I reread the report because I wanted to see, especially given all this concern about recession and how the inverted yield curve, it's the greatest economist in the world. It always predicts the recession, right? The yield curve inverted in 2004 and we had a recession in 2008. Oh my God, it's a great predictor. It's a great predictor. Sorry. I do not subscribe to that. Anyway, here were some of the things. Number one, automobile loans, which had been sluggish, now rising at the fastest rate in 8 months. Residential real estate loans, rising at the fastest rate in a month. Bank residual, that is bank capital, at an all-time record high, was up 3 weeks in a row and was up for 6 out of the last 7 weeks. All-time record high bank capital. Why is that important? Because banks get their capital mainly from their earnings. So that says something about bank earnings, and bank stocks have been performing horribly. Okay, there was just a thing I read today where yesterday was like the worst performance since 2011. So investors, this reminds me a lot of November and December of last year when investors were just dumping stocks. And what was I saying? You had to buy it. It was a correction. They're dumping bank stocks. Meanwhile, if you look at bank residual, which is literally bank wealth, it's assets minus liabilities, all-time record high, has been going up since January. So you have that. So the auto loans, real estate loans, bank residual, bank assets at an all-time record high. Gasoline demand at the highest level in 6 months. I mean, if we were going into a recession, you'd probably see gasoline demand trailing off. Distillate demand, that's diesel fuel, at the highest level in 3 months. What else? Tax receipts to the government. Now here's a very interesting thing, because in November and December we saw a very significant drop off in tax receipts, and it foreshadowed, or it was pointing to the slowdown in the economy at the time. Tax receipts have been rising very sharply, and where there had been a year-over-year deficit, in other words, this year's tax receipts were below last year, primarily because of the corporate tax cut, it's almost back to parity now. And very soon, current fiscal year tax receipts at the rate it's going will be above last year. So it's made a tremendous comeback. And again, I would argue that if we were in a recession or going into a recession, or the economy was slowing down further than it already is, we would not see that happening. Social Security payments rising at the fastest rate so far this year, 4.9% year over year, growing. That's a very significant fiscal support. Social Security is the largest government expenditure. Other withdrawals from the Treasury, which include military and defense, have accelerated significantly since early to mid-February. And that is the second largest expenditure after Social Security. What else? I mean, we've had all these things. I was really trying to look at the data, and again, these are things that create the conditions of the economy. I did not see one thing in all of that. I did not see one thing, and I was trying to be as objective as possible. I did not see one thing in any of those data which indicated an economic slowdown or that the economy was slowing more than it already has. As a matter of fact, the opposite was true. Everything I saw in that was an acceleration. So we're talking about fiscal flows, we're talking about bank credit, we're talking about refined fuel demand, all of that. So again, I do not buy all the cries and hysteria over the inverted yield curve predicting a recession. We'll see what happens, but I am on record as opposing the prevailing view right now, and it is everywhere. You cannot read an article, you cannot listen to a television discussion anywhere which doesn't have at least one person, if not many more, saying the inverted yield curve absolutely, positively is telling us we are going into a recession. And even the Fed believes that. Even the Fed believes that. And we have seen Jerome Powell and the actions that he has taken since January. Totally spooked and panicked by the market correction in November and December. I mean, why do we need a Fed, which is a monopolist, a monopoly entity, when basically if the Fed is just going to listen to what the markets are saying? I mean, that is, you know, you're going to be jumping from one policy direction to another. It throws a lot of volatility, unnecessary volatility, into the equation when the Fed is doing something like that. I mean, let's face it. The market could be up one day, it could be down the next day, for whatever reason. For whatever reason. To be jumping around and following movements in the markets and believing in your mind that this reflects at all times something rational and real, I mean, is silliness. It's ludicrous. But this is what this guy is doing. For me, he goes down, hands down, as the worst Fed chair so far that I've seen since I've been involved in this business, and that's 40 years, okay? I got started in this business in 1979. It's 2019, 40 years. I have not seen a Fed chair as bad as this guy. This guy is terrible. He is absolutely terrible. So I don't see any signs of recession. Now, on a side note, or on a separate note, I should say, my service is about giving a macroeconomic perspective using MMT. It's not a trading service. It is a macroeconomic perspective using MMT. Now, I throw in recommendations on there, stocks, currencies, commodities occasionally, but really what it is a big picture on the economy and the outlook and basic economic conditions through the perspective of MMT, or using an MMT understanding. Now I have people ask me, don't you think because of the the viral nature recently of MMT, how it has exploded into the mainstream, that all of these other places are going to start to latch on and they're going to start to use that? Unequivocally, no, I am saying. First of all, we saw, what's his name, the guy who runs BlackRock. We saw him say that's garbage. Larry Fink. Okay, that's garbage. MMT is garbage. Meanwhile, supposedly, according to a story that Warren Mosler talked about in his book, he explained the principles of MMT to Larry Fink a long time ago at Fink's request. He wanted to know. The two of them, they either worked at the same bank or at competing banks or something, and Larry Fink heard about Mosler, and Mosler explained. But now Fink says it's garbage. So number one, you see the top guys, a lot of the top guys, who are just denigrating MMT. So, I mean, maybe they're using that as a smokescreen because maybe they think, oh, if I say something bad, then we could be the only ones to use it. But I don't believe that. I think truly these guys are all cut from the same cloth, and when he says it's garbage, in his mind he believes it's garbage. I had another guy from another big hedge fund recently who signed up for my service saying at the end of the trial, I'm not going to be able to use this information. So I mean, it's kind of laughable. So you're not going to be able, in other words, to rephrase that, I'm not going to be able to use MMT, or let's take MMT out. I'm not going to be able to use the proper understanding of the functioning of the monetary system. So that's literally what he was saying to me. He didn't think, he thought he was being, I guess, you know, sophisticated or whatever, like, you know, oh, big hedge fund. Big hedge fund. Guy signed up for a 30-day free trial, said, I'm not going to be able to use this information. So in other words, I'm not going to be able to use MMT. Just take out MMT, which is an acronym. I'm not going to be able to use the proper and concise understanding of how the monetary system functions. I don't want that. I want to stay in my own bubble, my own world, my own belief system. So now I see this replicated over many examples. So to the question, don't you think, Mike, they're all going to catch on and they're all going to start using it? Absolutely, unequivocally, no is my answer. Because I see it. I see it as clear as day. I see it. And the funny thing is, they think they're being kind of, you know, smart, maybe above me, maybe more informed, right? This kind of stuff. But really what it is, most of the time, it's an admission of what? Ignorance, laziness, not wanting to learn, not wanting to expose yourself to something new thinking, which happens to be correct. So that's what it is. People say like, oh, it's over my head. Well, learn, okay? There's a 5-letter word called learn if it's over your head. I think it's important that people seek new information, seek knowledge, try to become more informed. That doesn't only make you a better trader and a better investor, it makes you a better person. Yes. So anyway, I don't see any recession. I could be wrong. We'll see how this goes. 6 months, a year from now, well, I'm sure I'll come back and do videos about this just as I have on my others where I've been right every single time. But yeah, I don't see it. I mean, you'd think it would show up in the numbers somewhere. It hasn't. All right, everybody. See you later. Bye.